Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's so lovely to have you here, Dr. Charles Upton and Afra Khan.
Glad to be here.
Today, great. I'd like to begin with a brief bio on yourself, and then we can head into today's topic, a necessary topic that something myself and Afra, we've been discussing UFO phenomena for the past few years. And when I came across your works and the nature of books that you have written about, there was definitely a very keen interest. And I'm just very grateful to be here today in your presence and to be able to have this time. So thank you for that.
Well, glad to be here.
Charles Upton is a Sufi Muslim author, activist, and poet, presently identified with the Traditionalist Perennialist School founded by René Guénon. He has authored 13 books on metaphysics and social criticism, 4 poetry books, and 3 on Islam and Sufism. A protégé of the Beats, he has a background with the Catholic and Presbyterian churches, the spiritual revolution and peace movements of the 1960s and 70s, and the sanctuary movement for Central American refugees in the 1980s. In 1988, he joined the Nimatullahi Sufi Order out of Iran under Dr. Nurbakhsh, which he remained connected with until Nurbakhsh's death in 2006. In 2020, he became associated with the lesser-known silsila of the Alawiyya Tariqah. In 2013, he conceived the Covenants Initiative based on the book The Covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the World by Dr. Andrew Morrow, which has since become an international peace movement in the Muslim world. He is presently executive director of the Covenants of the Prophet Foundation. And here we are today. So thank you once again. Afra, I would love to have you sort of open the space up with anything that you would like to begin with.
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be, to be in this conversation between the both of you, and I'm just happy to pose some interesting questions that I have in the context of UFOs. And it's so amazing that we have Charles here, to share all of his insights and the work that he's done previously with his books and tying in with the UFO phenomenon. So I think I just want to dive straight in. So Charles, your book, Cracks in the Great Wall, it argues that traditional metaphysics offers a unique lens in the understanding of UFOs. Can you elaborate on these two very seemingly disparate fields and how they connect?
Well, how am I to do this? To begin with, part of traditional metaphysics, sort of in a very wide definition of that, which would include cosmology, the structure, the structure of being, which in turn includes the ontological hierarchy of different levels of being, which appears, for example, in Ibn al-Arabi as the five Hazrat, different presences of God on different levels. once you have a hierarchy of being, you can start to situate who the, where the UFO aliens, so-called, come from based upon the phenomena that they manifest. And it's pretty clear to me that these beings are, by and large, in general terms, what we Muslims call the jinn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the jinn are lower on the ontological hierarchy than the angels, but they are higher in the sense of subtler, at least, than the material world that's presented to us by the five senses. Their world, however, is very close to our world. It's, you could call it quasi-material, or it's, in a subtler form of matter, this and this. Usually they're invisible to us, but they have always, it has always been attributed to them the power of temporary materialization, temporary appearance, and interaction with humanity on that basis. And, they will appear and interact with us, and sometimes even leave behind physical objects, and certainly physical traces of their, what is called their craft, I suppose you could call it craft. And then they will disappear again. So this is, angels appear and disappear, but they don't fly around in spaceships, So you can tell a difference there. And, if you have a sense of, intuition of what Christians call discernment of spirits, you can feel the celestial quality of the angels, as if they're rays of light coming directly from Allah in personal form, but directly from him. Whereas the jinn are another race of beings, sort of like us. According to Muslim doctrine, they have free will like we do. And according to some commentators, actually, as one Christian priest, Father Seraphim Rose, Eastern Orthodox priest, who talked about, in early days of Christianity, when paganism, was still very strong in the Greco-Roman world, and a lot of magicians were invoking various beings, which the Greeks call the daimones, who we get from that our English word demon, but it's not exactly the same thing. Daimones are not all evil, but they are a particular class of beings, and these are the beings that the magicians of the pagan world that surrounded early Christianity would interact with. And so he talks about, the early Christian saints knew about these beings, and they instead of saying, "Look to the sky, you will see them," often the advice was, "Don't look to the sky." There are too many of these beings floating around, because there are too many magicians who are invoking them, and it's not particularly healthy to see them. And also, he came up with the statement that they do have a kind of technology of their own. And you can see that in terms of Islamic doctrine. Solomon, employed the jinn in actual works, in architecture. They would help him build, and they would dive for undersea treasures and pearls. And so they had a sort of a technical, or a skillful way of operating in terms of our material world. So you could say they have a kind of technology, but all of this very much fits the parameters of what we are seeing nowadays as what we call the UFO aliens, falsely imagining them to all be from other planets, as if they were astronauts. They don't act like astronauts. They act like the jinn. So that's one place where metaphysics comes in. But then when you're talking about the mythologies, the belief systems that grow up or have been injected into the phenomena known as UFOs, you will often see in a kind of inverted metaphysics. It's a little hard, to talk about that directly, but you'll see metaphysical principles that are expressed but inverted as to their original meaning and significance. And this kind of inversion is, to me, a sign of the developing religion of Al-Dajjal, the Antichrist. So I believe that this phenomenon is, by and large, pretty sinister. Now, of course, not all the jinn, according to Muslim doctrine, are demons. They're not all evil. Some of them are Muslims. Some of them are believing Muslims. They follow the Quran. Others follow Christian doctrines, Christian beliefs. Others follow the Jews. But a number of them, and sort of, I would say, you're more likely to encounter those who do not do that, who, if they worship anything, they may worship their own kings and queens or something in that order, but they are not the worshipers of Allah. And if they're not, then or the more we interact with them, the more we will this will actively subvert our own faith and connection with Allah, which is the great danger of these beings. So, and you can see that in in a lot of the very negative after effects that people experience after alien abductions, or even just encountering them, in a less intimate form. So.
Now, some interpretations of UFO encounters suggest contact with the superior alien race, and some with races that are far less superior, let's say, in development of the physical manifestation, from the human constitution. Now, what are your views on this?
Well, I mean, it's depending on what you mean by superior. Do you mean more proficient in manipulating reality and creating various phenomena, or you mean morally superior? I mean, what superior in what sense?
In terms of, let's say, technology,
Well, yes. I mean, the jinn have abilities that transcend in many ways the abilities of the human race. I mean, that they seem to be able to manipulate our world of matter from another standpoint and have effects on it in many dimensions that we don't know how to do. So if you call that superior, certainly, the jinn are from a subtler world, and subtler worlds are, generally speaking, causal in relationship to more gross materialized worlds. So, they've got the advantage of us on that level, but in terms of their ability to guide us, which is often attributed to them, I don't think so. I mean, Ibn al-Arabi said human knowledge is higher than jinnish knowledge. And and by human knowledge, he undoubtedly meant the knowledge brought to us by the prophets. That's on a higher order than the knowledge of the jinn, and it's actually more appropriate to us because, since we're human beings, it is only right that we follow human prophets and be taught by human teachers, not by something like a lizard from another dimension. They wouldn't particularly have much to say to us as human beings unless they just want to make us more lizard-like, which I would not recommend.
Yeah, now, do you think that there are potential dangers associated with interactions with these, if at all, with these extraterrestrial beings, according to your academic and, let's say, philosophical framework?
Certainly. Let me see. I see if I can get to my. Okay, I'm on my desktop here, and one of these files has got the answer to that. Okay. Now there's a Harvard psychiatrist who's passed on now. His name is Dr. John Mack, and he his practice was in providing therapy to people who had experienced alien abductions.
Mhm.
And he chose like 100 of the most interesting cases, to put together in his book called Abduction. And it's very interesting what he found out. He himself did not have particularly a negative view of these beings for some reason, because the way he describes their effects on the human race is terrible. But his idea was, well, truth is tough, and traumatic experiences like this break you out of your old ways of thinking and initiate you into new worlds, and so they're hard on you, so they do terrible things to you. Well, I mean, if you're kidnapped by terrorists, and held for 2 years in a dungeon somewhere, and it'll change your life. You'll come out with a much wider perspective on things. I will agree with you there, but I do not recommend, seeking that out. Now, this is the way he describes what the after effects of alien abduction. He says, this is from one of my books. Harvard psychiatrist John Mack lists, quote, this is quoting him now, physical and psychological scars of their experience ranging from nightmares and anxiety to chronic nervous agitation, depression, even psychosis, to actual physical scars, puncture and incision marks, scrapes, burns, and sores. He informs us that the alien abductors routinely subject their victims to terrifying and humiliating medical-like procedures. They also voyeuristically view them performing sexual intercourse or themselves have intercourse with them, which Max sees no problems with, Harvard psychiatrist A. He speaks of broken marriages and alienation of affection between parents and children as among the more common after effects, and says that negative physical and psychological effects persist even in cases where spontaneous healing of chronic or incurable diseases occurs, which does happen sometimes. Now, what I did is I looked around into the annals of exorcism, and most of those, in the Western world come from the Catholics. I don't know if the practitioners of Ruqya have, archives where they talk about their experience, but the Catholic Church was very organized about this, and it took voluminous notes and kept a lot of reports. And so what you have is a description of what interaction with demons. This is called the level of demonic vexation. There's demonic possession among the Catholics, where the demon takes over your personality entirely and negates your will and replaces your will with its will. And then there's obsession, which is all mental, but this is vexation, which is more of a physical kind of attack, and describes the actions of these beings like this. This is from a Catholic source. If effects include physical attacks on a person, cuts, burns, scratches, punctures, writing on the skin, bites, beatings, blows that leave bruises, swellings, bloody sores, broken bones, incisions on the skin that spell words or form signs that persist for a certain time and then disappear, and illnesses with unknown causes and unknown cures. Some victims have been the targets of stones, excrement, and feces that seem to have come out of nowhere. Others have been hurled from their beds or downstairs, tossed in the air, or thrown down to the floor or against a wall, or dragged by the hair by an invisible hand. Others have been taken from where they were and transported long distances, which is very common in UFO abductions. You're taken aboard the spaceship, and at least you're up in space somewhere, and sometimes they take you to another planet, or what appears to be another planet. Okay. Vexations can break up friendships and isolate a person. a couple who are married or engaged to be married can separate, or to the contrary, two persons can become engaged even though they are incompatible. So the parallels between these two accounts are so obvious, you know, so that is to be definitely to be taken into consideration.
Although less severe, I would say, from the accounts that exist on the internet with regards to these alien abductions, or perhaps not. What do you have to say about that? Do you think that these are similar phenomenon, or they're just simply parallels that exist between the two?
I think they're pretty much the same phenomenon, because the abilities that are attributed to demons are the same as the abilities that are attributed to the kafir jinn, the unbelieving jinn. I think that's who we're dealing with. I mean, the phenomena fit that profile better than any other. Now, there are people who have these experiences, and they're not entirely negative, or at least there are people who have a very materialistic mindset, and you know, they had never imagined anything in a million years, anything like this happening, and then it happens to them, and they are amazed, and their you know, their perception of reality is immensely expanded, and the scales fall off their eyes, and they realize there's so much more to reality than they thought, and and that's very, you know, impressive to them, particularly if they have no basic religious background or training. They're coming into this naive with no instruction, and so they are amazed, and very often these beings will start talking to them and start giving them various philosophical ideas or predictions about what will happen on Earth, you know, predictions of the future. All of this is extremely intriguing to people, and people may consider it to be in many ways positive, even though difficult aspects of the experience may be there. They're not going to think about those. They're going to think about all this amazing stuff that they are now learning. So that's a very seductive aspect, because these people are not just, these beings are not just tormentors and attackers. They're also seducers. And those ideas are very, you know, very seductive. There's a well-known ufologist, if you want to call him that, Whitley Strieber, who was abducted or contacted by these beings, because sometimes the UFO aliens don't just take you up into their spaceship. Sometimes in the middle of the night, they materialize inside your bedroom or walk through your wall and do various things to you in you know, the comfort of your own home. So he had an experience with these beings which was horrendous. They actually literally raped him. They sodomized him to the point where he was so injured that it took years for him to recover. He was in pain for years, but never once did he say, maybe these beings are not very healthy. Even after that experience, he was so amazed by what had happened that he couldn't get beyond that. And so he says, well, I'm willing to put up with the pain and the damage because I'm learning so much. Yeah, that's why having, you know, a religious background and training and experience, hopefully, is so important, particularly nowadays, in dealing with beings like this. Because if you have that, you'll know what they are. You'll know they're not good for you, although you ought to know that from the way they treat you half the time. But people are pretty naive, and they have to be taught what is good for them, and you'll know what's good for you. And so you will do your best never to encounter one of these beings again. But there are a lot of people that don't go that way. They just want more.
So would you say, go ahead, Alicia.
Actually, I just wanted to interject here and say that C.D. Charles, like, dealing with a lot of people in various matters of spirituality and so forth, I do receive from individuals the phenomenon of possessions, and how these beings inhabit homes and opt not to be, in most of the cases, I have found them, well, according to what I've been told, not the mind our own business types. They would be more of the bothersome types. And so what would you say? Like, many of these families have been struggling for years, perhaps even more than a couple of decades, and they're just clueless as to how to resolve the matter, to be free of them. And there's no, I mean, these exorcists, Islamic exorcists, have not really been fruitful either. So what happens? Are they supposed to just accept this?
The Islamic exorcists, I mean, I don't know much about that world. My impression is you have various, exorcists or sheikhs or something who they say, well, I deal with the jinn. And half the time, and this is just my impression because I haven't done no survey on this, this is not authoritative. Half the time they want to be exorcists because they kind of like being around the jinn, and this is a good excuse, And I mean, I saw a video of one Islamic exorcist who had cast the jinn out of this woman, and he says, "Okay, we've cast the jinn out. Now we'll bring the jinn back and have the jinn repossess the woman, so we can question the jinn on how we can." Go into the kingdom of the jinn, and we'll torture him until he comes up with all his secrets, that will let us know how that we can attack and conquer the rule of the jinn and overthrow it, which is a pretty, you talk about malpractice. That is immense malpractice. So, I mean, those who, those practitioners of Ruqya who do that a lot, I think a lot of them they really would like to be magicians, but they don't want to say that, or they don't want to think that, so they'll say, well, I'll be an exorcist, but because it puts them in the same framework. I could be wrong. At least this one guy I would say that about, but that was just one video I saw on YouTube. Well, I mean, how do you the way you do it is you need to come closer to Allah, and this may potentially involve interaction with angels, but you can't just invoke angels. Allah sends angels; they're His messengers. It's up to Him whether they appear. You can say, "I am ready. I am open. If it's your will, please send me an angel, to drive these beings, help drive these beings away." That's one way to go. But the closer you come to an intimacy with Allah and a constant sense of His presence, the more pressure you will be putting on these possessing forces. And, maybe within that context, once you're there, once your spiritual life and your relationship to Allah is deeper, going beyond, the obligatory practices, which all Muslims must do, and, getting more deeply into what you call the supererogatory practices, and, the practice of zikr. Now, of course, zikr, traditionally is supposed to be conferred by a Sufi sheikh, and that's what empowers that practice and gives you more or less the right to practice it. But since Sufi sheikhs, I mean, these rules come from times where Sufi sheikhs were readily available, and to the degree that they're not readily available, I see nothing wrong with invoking the name of Allah. Doesn't any Muslim have the right to say Allah? Of course they do. It's just, it is more or less on a different level than what is supposedly going to come from a Sufi sheikh, but it's worth doing. and so,
Absolutely.
get closer to Allah, and you will make the environment of your soul less congenial to those forces. And that's a lifetime work, of course. So.
Right. And just before the next question from Afra, what about the, like, how does one decipher the difference between a qareen and a jinn, or is it the same, or a separate category?
Okay, the first is, again,
the qareen. Qareen is like the I don't know what the English equivalent to that is, but it's like the jinn that's basically appointed the one that influences the thoughts. And
yeah,
I don't know, I guess it's,
yeah, that's always going to be there. And from a Sufi standpoint, that is on one level a personification of the nafs. The nafs, nafs al-amara bil su, the nafs, that incites or commands to evil. That tendency is always going to be there. And to the degree that you're under the power of, what the Christians call your passions, or what the Sufis call the commanding self, you're going to be vulnerable to the jinn who will come in and operate on that weakness in you. So, the jinn that's appointed to tempt you is simply saying, we're going to be in this world, their temptations are going to be there, and some of the temptations are going to come from the realm of the jinn, not just from our personal psychology, but our personal psychology is more or less the point of entry, for those forces. So, well, I mean, you don't want to succumb to that being's temptations either. It's appointed for you because this world is a world of choice, and we, the greater jihad is, I think, incumbent upon everyone. And that jihad is a struggle against, a certain set of forces in the psyche and in the subtle world. And, that's one of the inducements for people to come closer to Allah, is because that, the Christians call it the adversary, because the adversary is there. You will turn to God. You will say, I'm sorry, I don't want that. If it wasn't there so clearly, I wouldn't know what to say no to. So that's why it's appointed, because you need to have that choice. But beyond that, the existence of those beings, tells you that your way is to turn to Allah and nothing and no one else. So you don't really make a distinction between those. You just say like it's saying, why is there evil in the world? And there's evil in the world because this is a world of choice. And that's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to fight in the greater jihad. How can you fight in the greater jihad if you have no enemy? So.
Well then, Charles, would you say that there are some who are more susceptible to the alien abductee experiences? I mean, is there a particular profile that you'd say exists? Or are these abductees just chosen at random?
Well, I don't think they're chosen at random, but but nor would I say, though, that everybody who has certain difficulties and certain weaknesses is going to be abducted. But generally speaking, early childhood trauma, or any kind of trauma, damages the psyche, damages the psychophysical system. And whenever there's damage like that, you're more susceptible to these influences. And of course, so many people are damaged for so many different reasons. But those who have, you know, yeah, I'm not simply that's what it is, and you can, you know, I mean, even a physical trauma might open you to that, you know, and certainly the other thing that opens you to that is disobedience, you know, to the law of Allah. You know, if you don't want to follow His will, if you want to follow your own will instead, well, the kafir jinn will come in and say, well, that's fine. You want to follow your own will, great. One of the things they will do, they may want to turn you into a magician. Ultimately, they'll say, you know, that they will appear and they say, oh, you know, wow, you're so powerful. You know, we couldn't withstand you. You invoked us, and now we must do your bidding. You know, master. You know, what is your bidding? You know, your wish is our command. Well, actually, they're seducing you. You know, they are exercising power over you, but making it appear that you have power over them. That's just the way, you know, you go if you were going in the direction of becoming a magician. But the thing is, that kind of, you know, that sort of thing operates on different levels. Whenever you're involved in self-will, saying, I'm going to do what I want, which is, in other words, from the Sufi standpoint, you're doing what the nafs al-amara bil-su wants, but it's you to begin, you know, at that point, that's who you think you are. And so it's the same thing as saying, well, I want to do what I want and not what Allah wants. Then you're putting yourself in the field of all those dark forces. It does not mean, however, that anyone who has had an abduction experience or you know, has had an experience of possession, that's all their fault. You know, you did something wrong, you did something evil, and now you're being punished. That's one of the things that opens you to those dark influences. But other things can simply be the blows of life, things, you know, that have been very hard for you in your childhood or later, or, you know, physical or emotional traumas. And, you know, they will like crack you open in a way that will make you susceptible to those forces. So the way to turn a trauma, either physical or psychological, into, you know, away from a total misfortune into a potential good fortune is to say, well, this has shown me I need to get closer to Allah, because I can't just rely upon, you know, my psyche being relatively intact and my being relatively safe from these dark forces. I am now vulnerable. And so I must turn more radically and more deeply and in a more heartfelt and sincere manner to Allah and ask for His mercy. And so the very experience of being damaged by these beings can, you know, if you know how and are willing, you know, to do the right thing, can bring you closer to Allah. But you're going to have to, you know, take that route yourself. You can't just say, well, you know, maybe this won't bring me closer to Allah. If you do nothing about it or don't know what to do about it, it's not going to bring you close. So, and it may be, I wish I knew more about Muslim exorcism. It may be that if you're seriously, you know, committed to the path of Allah on a deeper level than just following, I shouldn't say just because it's important, but then following the rules of the Sharia, you will, God willing, find someone, inshallah, who really knows how to do exorcism, but does it in a better context than a lot of the, you know, dime a dozen ruqya exorcists that you hear about, you know. So, and also it wouldn't hurt to recite the last two surahs of the Quran, You know, that's very powerful. If you know, you need to know what they're not just magic words. You also need to know what they mean, understand them. You know, Surah Al-Falaq, you know, is precisely, you know, filled with the power of Allah to banish these beings. It doesn't mean it'll happen overnight, but that's a powerful tool. And the Surah An-Nas, it's a little different because one of the things these beings are trying to get us to do, and we can see this nowadays in things like transhumanism, is they're trying to get us to reject the human form, which means essentially to reject the amana, the trust that has been laid upon the human race by Allah, that we should be his representatives here on earth. And that's a whole other story. But that's why the Surah An-Nas is the last surah of the Quran, because the temptation to reject the human form itself is the last temptation the human race will be subject to. So.
Yeah, well, this opens up a whole lot of questions that perhaps we could tackle, Alicia, in another video with Charles, because it's getting very interesting. But just keeping things in the same vein of thought as we've been discussing previously, would you say that there is a distinction in the nature of the experience that one could have with these aliens, or could they also be perhaps there could be experiences with them where there's a nature of knowledge exchange, like let's say the one Solomon was purported to have with these beings of coming from other dimensions, also known as the jinn in Islamic culture? Or do you think that there has to be like the sense of darkness and gloom surrounding these experiences with the aliens?
Remember, you know, Solomon was the last of the prophets who was given the right and the command by Allah to deal with these beings. You know, unless I'm wrong, all we know from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was, you know, he once bound, at least on one occasion, bound one of the jinn that needed binding because it was causing problems. Well, I mean, the jinn are around. The collective psyche of the human race has been cracked open. And there is simply, even just on the level of know your enemy, you know, perhaps some knowledge of their world is valuable now. Given that world is impinging on our world, and we better understand it. But I think, you know, there's nothing the jinn can tell you that the prophets haven't told you in a better and more complete way, and a way more in line with the needs and aspirations and destiny of the human being. You know, actually, I believe that the jinn who make themselves known to you are not to be trusted. The jinn have, and you know, if what I'm saying right now is some knowledge of the jinn world, then perhaps it's worth knowing about that world up to a point. Because what I say is, you know, the jinn have a function in the divine economy, doing the will of Allah, you know, in the universe, you know, fulfilling their role. I mean, one of their roles is as, you know, what in Northern Europe are called, you know, the elves, or the, you know, the spirits of vegetation, the spirits of different natural, you know, phenomena, where they're working, you know, to maintain the connection between, you know, the trees and such with the higher worlds, so you know, they can continue to survive, and they're doing their part. They're doing their part in nature, and you know, but the ones who are doing their part in nature don't have so much the desire or the inclination or the need to interact with human beings. because that's a waste of time for them. They've got their job and they're doing it. So you don't say all of them are evil, but you know, if they come and say, "Hey, listen to me, I've got something to teach," you know, you might as well say, you know, I have all this teaching from the greatest of the human teachers and the prophets and the Alawiyya, and you know, and sorry, I don't think I really need what you would teach me. It might be true on a level, but I've got a better source already, you know.
What about in terms of exchange of technological knowledge, you know, that could
Knowledge.
benefit humanity?
Yeah, they have been doing that. They have been inspiring a lot of technological developments, but I think we're getting to the point where we're seeing that those technological developments are ultimately at the point of destroying the human race. You know, it gave us many benefits. You know, it seemed wonderful. I mean, in the 19th century, everybody thought technology was wonderful and could do no wrong. In the 20th century, that thought may have continued up until nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Then people started to say, maybe this isn't too good for us, this technology. It could destroy the human race and all life on Earth. So we've got technology, we've got to deal with it. And when new technologies come along, we hope we learn to use them in a good way. But it may be that the ultimate reason that the jinn are inspiring us with new technologies is because they want to get rid of us. And they want us, as I say, to deconstruct the human form. And this is my theory. I've got a theory, and this is not authoritative, but this is, yeah, I call it a myth because it's a story that has definitely some truth to it, but you can't swear by it. But certainly in the Quran, the jinn are presented as an earlier race, as of an earlier race on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then later came the human race. Well, it seems to me likely that in an earlier world age, the jinn possessed the amana that is now ours as human beings. And they did something terrible with it, and Allah decided to take it away from them. And this can be seen, although this is no proof, once again, in the story of Iblis, you know, in the world, in the other world, in the world before birth, where Allah, you know, commands all the angels to bow down to Adam before he has been sent to earth to be, you know, his Khalifa, you know, in terrestrial existence. And all of them bowed down except Iblis. Now it says, well, in Iblis, he was of the jinn, which is interesting. It was like a jinn that had somehow been admitted to the company of the angels. Very much like in Norse mythology, Loki, the trickster god, was admitted to the company of the Aesir, who are the gods. Very much, you know. Now, you have races in various religions who are looked at as, you know, spiritual in the sense of invisible to us with great powers and this, but they tend to be opposed to the gods. You know, in Greek mythology, you have the gods, and then their opponents are the titans. In Hindu mythology, you know, the gods are the devas, and their opponents are the asuras, the warrior demons who are always fighting to try to conquer heaven. And it's very, very similar to the jinn versus the angels. I mean, that there are legends that in ancient times, and you know, the sources of these legends was pre-Islamic, but that there was a great war between the angels and the angels won, and the jinn were demoted or cast out in some way, which is just the same story that Greek mythology tells about the war between the gods and the titans. the Titans were an earlier race who had dominion over the earth, but they were supplanted by the gods. The gods conquered them. So very similar stories, but in any case, Iblis says, far be it for me to bow down to Adam, a being created from mud, from the dust of the earth, where I am a being created from smokeless flame. So forget it. And it's exactly like, and this is not proved, but this is something to think about. Allah had said to Iblis as a representative of all the jinn, okay, you're fired. I'm taking away the amana and I'm giving it to Adam instead, who I'm about to send down to earth to be my Khalifa there, like you used to be. And so, meet the new boss. And Iblis said, you expect me to worship the new boss? I was the king of the jinn, and we have the amana, and by God, we're going to get it back. And how are we going to get it back? Well, as he says in the Quran, give me a little time, and I will see if I can tempt, and pervert and corrupt your precious human race that you've sent to rule the earth. And Allah says, all right, I'll give you time. You'll have the same ultimate destiny, but I'll give you time to do your worst. And so I believe, though I can't prove, that the jinn, where some of them are saying to themselves, if we can tempt the human race to deconstruct itself, like through transhumanism, transgenderism, Elon Musk's thing of putting, an electrode or a radio receiver, whatever it is, in the human brain, which he's just done, and all this kind of horrible stuff, if we can get them to deconstruct the human form, then the human race will lose the amana. And they, foolishly enough, believe that if we lose it, it will somehow pass back to them and they'll be on top again. And I think that's rather foolish of them, because that's not what's going to happen. We may, or a lot of us may be destroyed in our humanity, which God forbid, but it looks like we're trying our best to do that. But that doesn't mean that it's going to pass back to the jinn. But they'd like to believe that. And so they're trying to tempt us to reject the human form. One of the symptoms of this is this alien human hybridization project, where they say, the earth is going to be almost entirely destroyed, and the only way any vestige of the human race can survive is by hybridizing with us and becoming half jinn or half alien or whatever it is. And that way, we're just doing this to help you, to save you. No, they're not. They're doing this to tempt us to reject the human form so they can take over again. But it's not going to work. That's not how things work. Allah has other plans than that. So that's my myth.
Yeah, well, and many people fear this technological singularity, right? And so
Yeah.
does your perspective offer like an alternative way of thinking about humanity's technological future, given this, in the context of UFO phenomenon, and how does one influence the other?
Well, I mean, you can see in a lot of ways, one of the interesting things about UFO phenomena is they will often appear as, as examples of technology that we have not quite created yet. You'll see something appear first, because this thing of the aliens appearing goes back quite a ways. There was a period when we were developing airships, dirigible balloons and things like this, and so that's how the aliens would appear. They would appear in big ships with propellers, except they could go much faster than our ships, and they were just more advanced than us, as if they were just leading us on through these various apparitions. Imagine what you could do, and showing us a technology that we're just on the edge of developing, and then actually probably contacting various scientists and technologists, either consciously or unconsciously, and planting the ideas. You know what you could do? We'll teach you how to do this. Even if you don't recognize us as the teachers, you'll still get our teaching. And maybe you will recognize us as the teachers. Maybe some of you, like Nikola Tesla, who believed he was in contact with these beings, right? Tesla, we've got some ideas that'll blow your mind. How about a death ray, and he was being inspired by them. And I think that's, and if they have any ultimate agenda, it's to lead us to our own destruction, not just through mass death, but through deconstruction of our humanity. But technology is here. We can't say, oh, just reject it. Oh, how are you going to do that? Because the truth is we are getting near to the hour. We have to admit that. And so the idea is not to make an eternally fatal error at the last moment, not to lose our souls. Human life may not continue on this earth, at least in its present form, much longer, or it may, but certainly all the signs of the hour are appearing. So how do we deal with that? Well, we don't succumb to the last temptation, which the last surah of the Quran, the Surah An-Nas, exists to protect us from. I seek refuge in the King of mankind, the God of mankind, against, the sneaking whisperer who whispereth in the hearts of mankind, of the jinn and of mankind. In other words, we need to stay in touch with the human archetype, with humanity as God created us, and not lose that connection, because if we do, we are lost. We have to stay human until the end. If the end is coming next week or in 100 years, stay human until the end, and don't think that, if the end comes, or we can somehow prevent the end from coming if we just reject our humanity, and so out of fear we dump the amana. That's not the thing to do. That's not the thing to do. Stay human, because it's only to the human race that God has sent his prophets, and that's our way. And if the jinn say we have a way too, you say to them, I'm sure you do, but that's for you, not for us.
So what does it mean to be human?
It means that we are potentially formed upon all the names of Allah. We are comprehensive. We may be, we're lower than the angels, ontologically, on the ontological hierarchy. We're materialized, we're subject to a lot more, limitations and temptations and all the difficulties of life, in a human body on earth. And yet potentially we, can actualize every name of Allah, everything, that is in Allah in terms of his different attributes, names, can be actualized in the San al-Kamil, in the complete human being. Angels are higher, but each one of them is sort of formed on one particular name. They're and it's wonderful that we should know them, and they can be very helpful to us, but they aren't comprehensive. That's why Allah ordered them to bow down to Adam. Remember, he told the names of all things to Adam, and then he turned around, and I'm not sure, there's different translations, but the ones I know of in English, because I know no Arabic, say he turns to Adam and says, you know, okay, here are the angels, tell them their names. The angels did not even know their own names because the repository of all the names was Adam. And so that's why he could order the angels to bow down. So we are potentially a much more exalted, you know, race of beings than we can imagine, given how hard life is here and how, you know, what vulnerabilities we have and you know, the vulnerabilities to disease, to death, to passions and temptations, to all sorts of traumas and difficulties that we tend to think, oh, you know, what's a human being after all? You know, it's a poor worm crawling on the earth. No, we're much more than that. And we must not forget that. And, you know, the prophets all came to remind us of our stature, you know, but it's hard to actualize that stature because we have to face so much in order to become complete human beings. But that's our job.
So you are suggesting that there are potential pitfalls in merging with technology going forward for the human race.
To say the least.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, yes.
Mm-hmm. But do you also not see a great scope for a further form of evolution for the humankind in merging with some form of technology that allows you to perform better, you know, subdue your vulnerabilities, let's say, overcome your weaknesses, you know,
Is
things.
that what it's actually doing to us?
It could. It has the ability to do that.
Well,
You
it
know,
claims the ability to do that, but we have to ask, is that actually what the effect of technology has been on the human race? I see, you know, at 75 years old, that as technology has developed, the human race has shrunk, become more damaged, become more, you know, lacking in substance. I'll remember something that the brother of the Dalai Lama said about what life was in Tibet before the Chinese took over. He said, well, life was harder, but it was easier to live it. So we might find that life will get easier, but it'll be infinitely harder to live it, which is what I see going on with technology. It's not ultimately a good. It's not human. We think we can put, you know, an electrode or, you know, implant in our brain and become more human. No, you become less human. Now, you can use those things. My wife has a pacemaker, which is a technological device, and it keeps her alive. Okay, that's good. You don't reject that, but you don't believe in it like it's going to make you more human and advance the human race. It's not. It hasn't, and it won't.
Right. You mentioned the last hour, right? And then you previously mentioned the Antichrist for the Dajjal. How would you say that? Would you define the Dajjal as a system or an actual personification of something or another? Because there's so many views on what the Dajjal actually is, and I would love to hear what your view is on
Yeah.
the
Well, the
Dajjal.
Dajjal is certainly a system. Whether he will be a particular human individual that is recognizable as such is debatable. But you know, many traditions, because the Dajjal exists in Christianity and Islam, both, and you know, in Christianity he's Antichrist, and I've found suggestions or you know, similar figures to Dajjal in Hinduism and Buddhism, you know, it's in Zoroastrianism, certainly. And, you know, there's a tendency to say there will be a particular individual. I don't think it's necessary to believe that, but I think that's something to watch for, because that could happen. But what Dajjal is, in terms of the end times, which is where he really constellates and becomes intelligible and, you know, in a working concept for us to make sense of what's going on, is it's like when the human race, when a human being, let's say when a human being you know, the doctor says, well, you've got 6 months to live. And a number of things will happen to that person, particularly if they do not have a deep faith in God. They will start to grab onto any number of things that they think will keep them alive, you know, even if it doesn't make any sense at all. You know, you know, in other words, you know, they don't want to get beyond the ego, beyond the nafs al-amara bil-su, because they think, well, that's death. So I got to hold on to the ego, because otherwise I'll die. You know, and so I think this can happen collectively. You know, it's like what's happening is the hour comes closer, is that Allah comes closer to all of us, whether or not we have wanted to come closer to him. He is now on his way to us. Now, of course, he's always here. We can't say he's actually on his way to anywhere, because he's everywhere. He's, you know, in each of our hearts, whether our hearts are veiled or not. He's the essence of all forms. And yet, on another level, the veils that hide him are becoming thin. Now, they can either become thin through our own devotion and our own search for ma'rifah and knowledge of God, and all that make up spiritual practice and the spiritual path. We can start to thin those veils. But the thing is, those veils are getting thinned anyway, even if no one has taken one step to thin them from the human side. And even if we've done all we can to run from Allah as he comes closer, because we identify him, you know, he's fear to us. He's fear, he's death, he's judgment, he's all the things we don't want. And so we run from him. But I'm sorry, he can run a lot faster than us. You know, we say if you take, you know, go toward Allah walking, he will come toward you running. You know, if you could also say, if you're running away from Allah, he will come toward you running 10 times faster, you know, and that's what happens when we get near to the hour. And so consequently, the human race is afraid. We're afraid of the possibility of nuclear war and of environmental destruction and of so many other things. So in order to prevent, as it were, Allah from coming, because we see him only as fear and judgment, we'll pool our collective egotism and create a collective ego, you know, something to worship. Technology, for example, that we would worship in the place of Allah. And that's essentially what Dajjal is. Now, Dajjal, you know, is blind in one eye, which means, according to certain interpretations, he can see this world, the material world, but he cannot see the other world. And we will create a material and most likely technological God. Artificial intelligence is certainly a part of that, you know, which actually there are some sects who now worship artificial intelligence literally as a God, you know. But anyway, you know, technology is one of the big faces of Dajjal. The worship of technology, not the use of it for good things, but the worship of it. And the worship of it, the idolatry of it, is sort of inevitable the way the human race is. You know, losing in many ways our faith in Allah, but trying to put our faith in technology. And so we will create this mass idol made out of all the idols that anybody has ever worshipped throughout this whole world age. you know, and they're all going to come and become part of this big idol. And this idol will, to a degree, be mediated by technology. And we'll worship that instead of Allah and think that will save our lives or save the planet, you know? And that's certainly one of the things that Dajjal is. And, you know, I'm sorry, it's not going to work because the Mahdi will come and he will announce at one point that directly behind him will be the prophet Jesus, who will return to earth and slay the Dajjal, because that's a way of saying Allah is coming closer to us, whether we like it or not. And everything, all the barriers we put up to prevent that because we're terrified of it, he will at one point sweep away. So why even start? Why not go toward him instead of trying to hide from him, which can't be done, you know? So this is Dajjal as far. In fact, when we get back here at this point, we can get back to UFOs. There is a big push, at least in this country, the United States, but you know, in many Western nations, to literally make a religion out of alien worship, out of UFO worship, literally to make a religion out of it. In so many ways, you look for that, you will see it. And there are people who are saying, well, you know, I didn't believe in God. God was a superstition, and you know, what do you mean you're created by some, as we say in the post-Christian world, some old man with a beard in the sky created us somehow? That's ridiculous. You know, we look at the information produced, the revelations produced by, say, the intelligent design movement, which shows DNA is immensely more complex, and cellular machines are immensely more complex than could ever possibly be explained by chance. Or, you know, and in other words, we now, you know, we're creating computer technology, and, you know, and we realize these complex systems, all of them are programmed by somebody. You know, you don't have this immensely complex computer system and software and all of that unless somebody designed it. Somebody had to code it. You know, it didn't just spontaneously come into existence out of a pool of slime, like people believe life, it used to believe life was created on Earth. It had to be created, coded by someone. And so the people in the intelligent design movement who believe in God say, well, see, here's the sign of the creator. But then the people who don't like that come forward and says, no, oh no. You know, if we see that our DNA, you know, has been created, you know, by some coder, the coder must have been the aliens. They are our creators. They're the ones that wrote the human genetic code. Like we're starting to write genetic codes ourselves right now. They're the ones that did it. You don't need a God. We are a technological creation of an extremely advanced technological society. That's one of the dogmas of the new religion. Now, the question of who coded them and who coded the people who coded them, the people who have that belief system don't like to go there, you know, because obviously that's just an infinite regression and it doesn't make any sense. But so anyway, and there's a great push among the powers that be in this country, the military industrial intelligence complex, to spread the belief in a UFO religion. And, you know, because people are starting to lose faith in God, they're leaving the churches, they're leaving the mosques. Maybe, you know, I don't know if Islam is increasing or decreasing right now in this country. It was increasing until recently. But a lot of people are losing their faith, obviously, in many religions. But they say, I don't believe in God because that's a bunch of superstition. But, hey, here's this advanced technological race that we can believe in that are actually appearing all the time. And we know they are because the Navy admitted that they see them on radar, and people have, you know, talking about crashed alien spaceships and recovered alien corpses are testifying before the Senate, the U.S. Senate. So it's real. So we can believe in that. And you know, and maybe they will come in and save us from nuclear war and save us from environmental destruction. you know, and there, that's where we will put our faith. And there's a profound motion in that direction, which is happening sort of in a way by itself, or as a response to, you know, the jinnish phenomena that are appearing, but also it's being engineered by the powers that be through social engineering. My evidence for this is, now here is an excerpt from a speech that was given. This is called Religions for a Galactic Civilization, is the name of the speech. It was given in 1981 by a man called William Sims Bainbridge. I think he's still alive. He's pretty old, but I was in email contact with him at one point. And it says here, paper given at the 19th Goddard Memorial Symposium of the American Astronautical Society, Pentagon City, Virginia, March 26th to 27th, 1981. So this is a speech given undoubtedly to Pentagon officials on Pentagon property, right? And in that speech, he says this. He says, these flying saucer cults are all quite insignificant, but one like them could well rise to prominence in a future decade. We need several really aggressive, attractive space religions meeting the emotional needs of different segments of our population, driving traditional religions and retrograde cults from the field. New cults tend not to be very creative, but draw their practices and doctrines from other groups and traditions. If they are to get galactic visions, which is what he wants, the best source is probably science fiction. Not only does science fiction offer grand images of galactic civilizations and specific notions of how to achieve them, but it is drenched in occult and pseudoscientific ideas which might well serve people's religious needs if packaged in new churches. So, and you know, William Sims Bainbridge is a prominent transhumanist. So he's saying we need to package, in other words, invent, you know, design. We, the social engineers, need to design new religions. No, not a religion that came from God through one of his prophets, through the social engineers, the technologists, you know, and a lot of them are associated with the CIA, you know, that whole world, the military. We will design new religions which will do what? They will drive traditional religions and retrograde cults from the field. Now, traditional religions are Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism. They are to be driven out, you know, relegated to the dustbin of history. This is what we're up to. This is what we're going to do. And I'm telling you at the Pentagon right now, this should be our plan. And, you know, these will fulfill the emotional needs, as if that's all religion is. Well, you need a belief system that makes people feel better about death or something like this, you know. So in other words, this is the religion of Al-Dajjal in black and white. On my screen, it's in black and white, very clear. This is the plan. And the plan is to destroy, among other religions, Islam, drive it away.
Yeah.
So that's the other part of what's going on. So you see the jinn manifesting on their own, you know, popping in there. There's a lot more of them coming in all the time, apparently, more apparitions and this and this. And then you see people in the military industrial intelligence complex, in the ruling elites of the United States, at least, and probably way beyond the United States, who are saying, well, yeah, we need a religion based on this stuff. So this leads one to ask and to posit the possibility that people from the military industrial complex have been in contact with these jinn for some time, like magicians have always done. Now we get magicians running the world. And, you know, you want to know what the religion of Antichrist is going to be? You know, this is it. Here it is.
Right. Thank you for that. This reminded me of some research I did a few years ago, and I had published some articles about the UFO phenomena in Saudi Arabia, which led me to discovering a video that was perhaps unintended to be placed on YouTube. And it was an actual UFO conference happening in Riyadh. And they had ufologists, you had all sorts of experts on this topic. And suddenly that vanished. It was deleted off the web. I'm not sure if it got around and whatnot, but it got deleted. But there has been a lot of underground talk and perhaps not so underground talk about, Saudi Arabia having contact, or just like you said, there's governments involved in collaborations and so forth. And I know from the Imami traditions of the Ahlul Bayt that there is mention of Imam Ali. Now imagine 1400 years ago, we're being told from these traditions that while people were sleeping, he was busy warding off other entities coming into the planet. So, and then fast forward into Neom. There's a lot of talk about Neom.
Dhul-Qarnayn in the Quran, goes which way is it? All the way to the west, I forget. It goes to the east, to the west, and he builds this huge iron wall to keep these beings, Gog and Magog, Yajuj and Majuj, out of the human world. That's the same function. That's what the Eastern Orthodox Christians call katechon, which is a Greek word that means warding off. In other words, the job of warding off the Antichrist. So this is what the traditional religions, one of their functions.
Right. Afra, shall we go into just a brief about Neom, for example?
I don't know if I can comment on that from a place of knowledge at this point in time, but this is just getting way more interesting. And I think we're just moving beyond the scope of this this particular conversation that we were supposed to be having, but just keeping things within the context. Charles has mentioned that he has suggested in his work previously that the Great Wall between realities is weakening, right? And why do you think that Great Wall, between the races and between the entities is weakening? And is the current rise of UFO sightings any evidence of this, or does it suggest that this is the weakening between the realities?
Yes, it certainly suggests that, and it's weakening for a lot of reasons. One, I speculate, is there's certain technological developments. I mean, even the mass use of electricity may have to do with it. Detonation of nuclear weapons may have to do with it. Things like that, which profoundly disturb the energy envelope of the entire Earth. On the other hand, that's one way to look at it, one of the factors. But there are magicians who've been working to do this. They want to weaken the wall. They want to open, as a common word, common term we're hearing nowadays, open portals into other dimensions. That means bust a hole, break a hole in the Great Wall that was built by Dhul-Qarnayn to prevent the forces of Yajuj and Majuj from breaking in. The magicians who love working with the jinn and want to do more of it, they want to break that wall down. The well-known black magician Aleister Crowley, who was actually, incidentally, he also worked for British intelligence, so he was a spy as well. did something that he called the Amalantra workings, a magical operation. And during the process of that, he brought through an entity through a portal in the Great Wall, through a hole in the wall that Dulkarnain had built. And he brought through an entity whose name was Lam. And he drew a picture of it, and it's commonly recognized that this picture is the first image we have of what later became the type of alien known as the gray, with the big head and like this. And so, that's what he was after. And he said, I brought this being through. Now I'm looking at the name Lam. Now, which surahs of the Quran have those three Arabic letters, Aleph, Lam, Mim? I forget which ones, but
Surah Al-Baqarah.
Okay, and
the second one.
They're kind of mysterious. They're not explained. People have different theories about what they mean. The best theory I ran into, I forget whose it was, but he said Aleph is the spiritual plane, Lam is the psychic plane, or let's say the plane where the jinn reside, and Mim is the material plane. That makes sense to me. And so what he brought through is something from the psychic plane, Lam. And Lam was called a collective entity, which reminds one of the demons that Jesus cast out of someone who was possessed. And he asked their names because it's common, at least in Christian exorcism, you find the name of the demon who's possessing the person, and that gives you power over that being. And he says, well, our name is Legion, for we are many. In other words, they were a collective entity. And so that's what Lam was. Now you run ahead. Who was a student, who were students of Aleister Crowley, who studied with him? One was L. Ron Hubbard, who founded the Church of Scientology. In certain ways, in certain ways it's a UFO religion. It has UFO or alien mythology as part of its doctrine. And the very word Scientology seems like it's a worship of science, right? Not theology, the worship of God or the understanding of God, but Scientology, the worship of science. So that's one, but the other one was Jack Parsons. Are you familiar with that name?
No, I'm not.
Okay, Jack Parsons was a student of Aleister Crowley. He and L. Ron Hubbard, who founded the Church of Scientology, were together in a lodge of Aleister Crowley's religion that he developed called Thelema in Los Angeles. They were part of the Thelema Lodge of Los Angeles.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons was a rocket scientist, who did a lot of early rocket research. And he went on from there to co-found the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the Aerojet Corporation. We're still going strong in space flight and things like this.
Yes.
He was, respected enough by the technologists and the powers that be in this country to have a crater on the dark side of the moon named after him, the Parsons Crater. So he was there. He was in that world. But at the same time, he was a pagan. He did pagan rituals at his rocket launchings. He declared, as Aleister Crowley had done before him, that he was the Antichrist, that he was the beast or Al-Dajjal. That's me, he said. And my lifetime goal and work is to destroy Christianity, he said. And I found a video on YouTube. I need to go back and see if it's still there. But back when he was operating, he was killed at one point when his laboratory blew up, which is quite appropriate, I feel. But he apparently hired a little hall to put on a demonstration, and you can hear the audience in the background moving around and laughing and listening to him. And he's up there on the stage with this device, which is a kind of an electronic Ouija board. Now we know that the UFO aliens, and I would say the world of the jinn, part of the great wall between our world and their world is the electromagnetic spectrum. Like when a UFO will fly over an automobile, the engine will die, and these beings can affect electronic devices. Very much the same thing when electronic devices is recognized by Christian exorcists with demons. Demons, cause static on your telephone, and when you start talking about them, you suddenly hear like this, So that's kind of a recognized phenomenon. So given that they can interact with the electromagnetic spectrum and with, electricity, Parsons created a kind of electronic Ouija board where, he had a keyboard where he could ask questions of the being he was talking to, and the being, through interacting with, the electronic, aspect of the device, could come back with a message. They could talk back and forth. Now, the being he was invoking at that point was called Babylon, Babalon, who's supposed to be a female entity that he was trying to bring through the portal. And he said to the audience, now, check this out. This is how we invoke demons. That's what he said. And this is a major guy, in U.S. aerospace industry and with ties to the military. And whoa! So you want to see how magicians who are literally dealing with demons have gotten right into the ruling structure of at least the United States, and not just the United States. It's got to be everywhere, So this is another thing that's eroding the great wall between the material world and the psychic or the etheric world, you would call it, that's punching more holes in the great wall that was built by Dulkarnain. And that's what's happening. And according to what René Guénon said, which is where I get the term cracks in the Great Wall, pretty much, he says, the Great Wall is weakening, and when it collapses, that will be the coming of the hour. That will be the dissolution of our world. And they're working at it. So.
And what are some of the criticisms, I'm curious, you've received for your approach to the UFO and extraterrestrial phenomenon, and how have you responded to them, and how do you continue to respond to that?
Well, I mean, the people who understand what I'm saying, just generally like it. The criticisms, I have to sort of go after the criticisms. They don't just come to me. I am part of a email circle which includes a lot of major ufologists of this country, who are Richard Dolan, Richard Doty, Lou Elizondo, a long list of people, who are known in the UFO world. Jacques Vallée, who I very much respect, although he doesn't understand the whole story, but he's the most objective researcher I know. And a bunch of people, Uri Geller, even, who was he's well known to those who remember him in this country, who was a psychic who supposedly could psychically bend spoons just by touching them, and was studied by, I think, Lawrence Livermore Laboratory and the Stanford Research Institute, who are studying psychic powers on behalf of the CIA and a lot of other intelligence organizations who wanted, well, magic. Spies could use that. Magic is, and this is where the CIA remote viewing, which is another word for clairvoyance, remote viewing project came from, is studying people like Uri Geller, because they wanted to see if this would work in espionage, and, you know, and spycraft. The idea that spies and magicians are like that is not an anomaly. You would see this in Aleister Crowley, even Rudyard Kipling in his novel Kim, about, you know, a young lad in India, this and this. That's a character, a kind of a character that appears in that novel. You know, that there's you know, the great game, you know, the secret wars and the intelligence and spy operations that are going on between the British and India and the Russians who want to encroach on India. And so there's all this, you know, spy activity going on. And one of the figures in there is a magician, you know, who's also a spy. So it's kind of recognized magicians and spies really are often the very same people. So anyway, what happens is I will give this kind of story to people in this email circle. It's actually presided over by one Jack Sarfati. Now, Jack Sarfati is pretty much a cutting edge physicist who is recognized by a lot of people I trust as having a real contribution to make to very advanced physics. But also, his story is he's now in his 80s, or, you know, late 80s, maybe even. And his story is, well, at the age of 12, around there, I was contacted through my telephone by a weird metallic voice. And the weird metallic voice told me that it was from a sentient computer run by artificial intelligence that was in a spacecraft orbiting the Earth. And it was talking to me, and it said, Jack Sarfati, you have been chosen to be whatever, you know. And then soon after that, he fell into the framework of some people from the armies and military types. Now, there are different projects in this country have been to identify particularly gifted youth, young people, and the people from the military will come to these parents and say, well, we've been following your son, and boy, he had a great, you know, incredible SAT score, and we see, you know, we see he's got abilities that are beyond the norm, and we want to take him under our wing and teach him what we know and hope that he can help us. And very often parents will say, well, that's wonderful. Wow, you know, our kid is more important than we thought. So they will get into these programs where children essentially are being programmed for a particular function in the whole social engineering push of the military industrial intelligence complex, including the creation of a UFO religion. So not long ago, Jack Sarfati suddenly showed a bunch of material. Now, the story that Jack Sarfati has had all along. Oh, and by the way, Jack Sarfati is the guy that introduced Uri Geller, you know, the spoon-bending psychic, to now, you know, there goes my mind to the guy who the producer director who did Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Spielberg. Introduced him to Spielberg, as if Spielberg, you know, possibly had been tapped by the military industrial intelligence complex to produce movies that would start to inject the idea of UFOs and the veneration of UFOs as our guides rather than old-fashioned prophets. The UFO aliens are our guides, and to inject ideas like this into the community mind, to the public mind, through his movies. And so Sarfati is the one who introduced, you know, Geller, who was being studied by Lawrence Livermore Laboratory and Stanford Research Institute, with, you know, with the input of many different spy organizations, the CIA, the DEA, the NSA, and naval intelligence, a long list. He put them in touch. That's an interesting piece of information. But Sarfati's story of who the aliens, quote, are, well, he will sometimes say they're like, interdimensional beings maybe from other planets, but more likely his story is, well, they are actually us from the future, because in the future we will learn time travel, and so we will be able to send people back to this time in order to interact with the human beings of this time. That's the story which is very contradictory, by the way, if you think about it, of who these beings are. And but suddenly he flipped. He suddenly presented all this material. Maybe they're demons. Could be they're demons. Here's Peter Levenda's book on, UFO religion, which has a picture of the devil on the front with goat horns and an inverted pentagram on his forehead. They're demons. It could be demons. And that's so different from his story all along. You would only hear that largely from the evangelical Christians. What, did Jack Sarfati find Jesus? I don't think so. He floated that idea out of nowhere. Later on the same day, he said in another email, we're that far from nuclear war. We're just, which is not untrue. We're very close to the possibility of nuclear war. He says, can the mechanical voice that I heard back when at the age of 12, can it save us from nuclear war? And I went back to him and says, well, okay. First you say suddenly out of nowhere that the UFO aliens could well be demons. And you show us a picture of the devil. And then you say, can the mechanical voice that comes from the UFO aliens save us from nuclear war? Aren't you actually saying, can the devil save us from nuclear war? Can Shaitan save us from nuclear war? Maybe we need to worship Shaitan, and that will save the earth. It was obvious. That's what he said. And I went back, now, Jack, what are you really saying here? And he says, yeah, but you're crazy. You're stupid, you're old-fashioned, you believe in archaic superstitions like demons. I don't want to talk about it. But in other words, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
I got him. And that's generally the kind of blowback. I have to go and find the blowback against my ideas. Most people who contact me say, hey, now I understand this better than ever. So.
Are there other researchers or thinkers whose work complements your perspective on the UFO phenomenon?
Well, let's see, there are some Christians. There was, a well-known, he's been dead for quite a few years now, an American Eastern Orthodox priest, Father Seraphim Rose. He wrote a book called Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, which I don't like all parts of it, but he's got a chapter on UFOs, which is amazing. I mean, I learned a lot from him. So and there's another one, another Eastern Orthodox priest from England who's now, recently written a book. I forget the exact title, but it was some title very much like mine, like the UFO deception. I forget. I think the word deception was in it, but his name is Father Spiridon Bailey. And yes, he more or less sees things the way I do. He's looking at other aspects of it, but yeah, he would be one. So,
looking ahead, what is your guidance on how humanity should prepare for potential future contact and developments with these extraterrestrials, if at all?
Contact. Boy, we've been contacted already. We're being contacted more every day. And I don't think we should be fooled by it. We should look at this as an attack on the human form. We should say no to it with every fiber of our being. And we should do good works and remember Allah much as the surah of the poets says, you know, how do poets, you know, shall I show you those upon whom, you know, the shayateen descend? You know, they are the poets, you know, they wander distraught in every valley and say that which they do not, except those who do good works and remember Allah much and vindicate themselves after they had been wronged. Now, this is relevant because the pre-Islamic poets generally believed, and probably rightly so, that they were being inspired by the jinn. So you talk about people who are interacting with the jinn, you know, an example of those are the poets of the age of ignorance. And that's the recipe. Now, you know, do good works is understandable. Remember Allah much is more essential, because if our attention is fixed upon Allah, our attention will not be hijacked by the world of the jinn. And but what does it mean to vindicate yourself after you've been wronged? Whitley Strieber was wronged. He was sodomized and raped by these beings. He didn't even begin to lift a finger to vindicate himself. He didn't stand up for himself. And you got to do that. You got to say, don't be seduced by these beings. If they treat you in horrible ways, say, you are not my friends. Okay? It's very basic stuff. And, you know, so contact on a mass level, these beings may manifest themselves on a mass level. Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised. But they would do it with the help of a lot of elements from the military industrial intelligence complex in what has been called in the past Project Blue Beam, which is simply stated the idea of a fake alien invasion. It wouldn't be fake. It would be a collaborative effort between human magicians in the military and the intelligence community and the jinn, you know, to together produce a spectacle that will fool almost everybody unless they have a profound faith in Allah and, you know, have a daily practice to remember him more and more deeply and ask for his guidance and ask for his protection against the beings that are trying to induce us to deconstruct the human form. That's how one prepares.
I'm keenly interested in how all of this ties in. This the Jalic consciousness, right? How there seems to be a flourishing consciousness and an increase in all what you're saying in terms of contact, in terms of more and more experiences of these entities, increase of these technologies which bring you to the worship of the Jal, who basically claims to be God, right? And that's what you're saying, that the Jal, the technology is bringing you, AI is bringing you to worship technology.
Yeah.
And how does this correlate in the law of polarity to the opposite side, to the side of light, to the side of light? And that would be, let's say, represented by the master of this time, Al-Mahdi, Al-Muntazir, the awaited one. And it is the belief of the majority of both Shi'i and Ahl Sunnah traditionalists that he's already born. Rather, he's in occultation, just like the Jal has already appeared and it is a system. Mahdi likewise is not to be born, yet he is born and he is present. How does this all tie in?
Well,
Because this is
we cannot bring, you know, Al-Qaim al-Mahdi out of occultation before his own time. You know, we have to wait, as you said, on him. But he has precursors, and the precursors are the angels, because there's a great increase in angelic activity in the subtle world right now, a massive increase. That's the other side. You want to know the other side? That's the other side. René Guénon,
If we have, right, okay,
talked
sorry,
about,
go ahead.
he said, okay, he said very simply, materialism will sort of solidify the shell of the world, or the great wall, or the carapace of the world, and largely, but not completely, cut us off from, you know, the direct reception of the grace of God. But this will not last, because the world, the shell of the world, will become so brittle that it will start to crack. And what will happen when it starts to crack? The first beings that will come forth from the subtle world will come from below. They will be the infrapsychic forces. Here we see the UFO aliens, the jinn, the demons, you know, God knows what paranormal beings people are seeing, big feet and werewolves, and, you know, more and more and more of that. You know, you go on YouTube, you want to see paranormal, you know, spooks, ghosts, and goblins. Here they come, you know, and UFO aliens. And they're very often talked about in the same video as if they're part of the same phenomenon, which I think they are in some way. So this happens. But then he says the next thing that will happen is the cracks will start to appear in the upper direction. And this will let in, you know, spiritual forces who will ultimately manifest as the Mahdi and the return of the prophet Jesus. But before that happens, which I say, like I say, we can't, you know, we can't make that happen any faster. But what we can do is open to the angelic dimension, because the angels are coming in vast legions of numbers to prepare the way, you know, for the Mahdi and the prophet Isa. They're opening the doors, they're opening the way. And if we can intuit them, then they may show us other ways we can deal with the dark forces. We have to be careful we don't invoke them, because you can become a magician by invoking angels just as well as by invoking demons, you know, as if I can summon their presence. And, you know, you don't summon them, but you become sensitive to them. You recognize that they're there, and then, you know, and they are carrying elements of the will of Allah. And, you know, they may give you, you know, insight into some of those elements of that will, and who knows what will flow from that. But at least if your attention, your subtle attention, you know, in the, because the angels, they come from higher than the psychic world, but they come through the psychic world because there's no other way for them to come. So there, you know, there are many levels of their manifestation. But if you put your attention on them to the degree that you were sort of naturally open to that, don't strain to open to that, because our job is not to, you know, is to do zikr of the angels, is to do zikr Allah, to remember God. But if we're solid enough in remembering God, then we can begin, possibly, if he wills, to open to the world of the angels. And then we can take from them, because we recognize them as carrying his will, various pointers about how to deal with our times. And I think it's very hard to talk about that, because there's so many ways people can go wrong. You know, I mean, invoking angels, doing rituals to invoke angels only for the good, you know, only, you know, to combat Shaitan and his demons. Well, you know, that's another way of becoming a magician. You know, I mean, many years ago, I was in British Columbia as a hippie, and we were talking about things like this, and there was one hippie guy that said to me, I'll clue you in, Charles. All magic is black magic. There's no such thing as white magic, you know? I mean, for example, if Ruqya is prayer, then it's real. If it's my power against the power of the jinn, even if you say you're on the side of the good, then it's magic. It will do you no good at all. So watch for the angels, but don't forget Allah. Watch for him, watch him, put your attention on him first, always. Because if you can't do that, you better not mess with the angels. It will just lead you astray. If you can put your attention on him first, then if he so wills, the angels might begin to manifest in your life. You know, might or might not. And if they don't, no problem. If they do, something interesting might happen. So. Because they're going to war against all the job. Right now, in the unseen world, the great war going on. Right now.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more questions, Afra?
I think we've tied it pretty much in, but you know, Charles has also opened up very interesting notions and ideas that perhaps we could tackle in another conversation. You know, his ideas on transhumanism and such, and the evolution of the human kind from this moment forward, and perhaps we can do that in another interesting conversation in the near future. But thank you so much for this wonderful divan, if I may say so. It's been such an honor to learn from Charles and you as well, Alicia. And I'm looking forward to more interesting conversations with you both. So thank you for you know, giving me the gift of your time and wisdom and knowledge and presence. I very much appreciate it.
Well, glad to be here. And, you know, I suppose this is what I'm supposed to be saying now because it's what I keep saying. So, you know, I once asked a Sufi advisor of mine, you know, how do you know what Allah's will is for you? And he says, well, it's what you keep doing over and over again, no matter what. It's what happens to you over and over again, no matter what, which is also a good definition of the actions of the nafs al-amara bil-su, you know, your obsessions, your addictions. But beyond that, you know, you find yourself always coming back to the same themes. And so that's probably what I'm supposed to be doing.
And we
Yes,
thank
and
you
we
so
look,
much, Charles.
yes, absolutely. We look forward to exploring more topics with you because the diversity of what you have shared with the world is just so beautiful and it's so diverse. So would love to plan another conversation with yourself. And I thank you, Afra, for your time, your attention, and energy and enthusiasm, most of all. This is definitely a topic that myself and Afra have always been speaking about. So we thank you for covering the necessary and bringing to light clarity on the subjects that infuse the Islamic lens, which many a time is skewed by different interpretations, but there's a lot of clarity based on your.
Well, I mean, I had to learn about this because I became vulnerable to it through various traumas. Some of them self-induced, you know, the life of a hippie and taking psychedelic drugs. And hippies all believed in, we believed the aliens were the good guys. You know, we called them the space brothers and this and you know, but so I had to make sense of these ideas because through various difficulties and traumas and foolish explorations in directions I shouldn't have gone, I became open to a lot of this. And so now it's my responsibility to express what I know about it, because otherwise it would just be sad that I had. It's too bad to have to know this kind of stuff. You know, we do nowadays. We need this knowledge, but it's rather depressing. So.
Okay, so until next time, we thank you once again, and peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Great to be here.
Thank you.